dynamics of the music determine how far apart the grooves must be. Loud passages need more space between grooves. Soft passages need less. The cutting machine automatically spaces the music grooves according to the sound signal it's receiving. Now,
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Phonic Files. This is pretty much going to be some sort of like quote-unquote album club, kind of like a book club, but it's more going to be we take a guest and we talk about an album that means a lot to them and has influenced them in some way, shape, or form. So today, well, first, my name is Ben. New to this whole podcast thing, so this first one might be garbage. I apologize in advance. I'm joined today by my buddy Jay. What's up, Jay?
Yo, what's up? How's it going?
It's going pretty great, man. So, even though obviously I know you, just for the people out there, what's your background musically? Like, you play music, you make music.
Yeah, I played trumpet in a band for about 11 years, first chair for most of that time. I currently make music under the persona or whatever the hell it is.
Stage name.
Of stage name of _J_. And I've loved music for forever, as long as I can remember, so
Yeah.
That's my background.
I mean, pretty standard, you know.
Yeah, standard band kid, you know.
Standard band nerdy fucking weeb. So, anyway, so today we're looking at an album by Electric Light Orchestra. We'll go ahead and give a little bit of background on them. They were formed in 1970 in Birmingham, England. And to date, they have 15 studio albums, 8 live, 15 compilations. They have over 50 million album sales, 19 CRIA certifications, 21 RRIA certifications, and 38 BPIs. So we're going to look at one of the compilation albums. We're going to look at All Over the World, the very best of ELO. So this album is what I did is I got a group of friends, and this whole thing started as just a little bit of an idea that I had. So I took this idea and I kind of went to a group of my friends that I know very much love music. And I was like, look, here's a doc I need you to make a list of albums that mean a lot to you, that inspiring you to either make music or just got you more into music, or just in some way, shape, or form influenced you and pretty much, or like personality or whatever about you. So this one is actually one of Jasper's albums, one of Jay's albums. So, so today this is the one we're going to look at. So, Jasper, why don't you tell me a little bit of your relationship with Electric Light Orchestra and this album specifically? How did you discover this artist?
Well, I can say that one of the reasons that I even chose, the compilation, right, instead of a singular album, like Face the Music or whatever, was simply because this is how it was introduced to me, right? Like back when I was, I don't know, 8 years ago, right? I was 13, and I was just starting to really get into music. Before then, yeah, I had played in band since I was 7, and I listened to some music, not a lot, but I was really getting into the pop era, and I was just really not finding like a lot of, I don't know, I've always had this attraction to really well thought out music, and music that really made you feel something.
Mm-hmm.
And that once I had started getting into just music in general, my mom started pulling out all these old albums that she wanted me to hear, right? And so this one I'm not sure how it started, but I think the first one I heard was Mr. Blue Sky, not knowing who ELO was at all before then. And it was, I think they had played it on the radio because this was like a year after ELO had released their 2012 remaster album, where Jeff Lynne had completely re-recorded a bunch of their hits on an album I think was called Mr. Blue Sky.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were playing that remake of Mr. Blue Sky on the radio, and it sounded new to me because, like, you know, usually at that time when I thought of music that had been made like in the 70s, right, you would think, you know, you would hear that in the recording. But with that, it was surprising to me that they were a band from the 70s. Like, it didn't seem dated. Like, it didn't sound dated to me. And so I was like, okay, wow, this is really great. Like, I couldn't there I had started to become so like so critical of music, you know, about music I liked and music I didn't like. And that song just it was like nothing I had heard before. And so my mom showed me more and more because she used to be into ELO, you know, back in the 70s when she was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she gave me like the CD of this album. And I listened to that on repeat. Because like there was not a single song on there. I mean, there are a couple that aren't like as great as the others, but the whole album was like, it was mesmerizing to me. Like, I've always loved orchestra music a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, part of my upbringing, my grandma, you know, she was really into orchestra music. I got talked to all the time about, you know, all the different composers, the classical composers, some of the newer ones, and like that, them and their sound of mixing orchestra and some of those really retro 70s synthesizers and vocals and all those things just created something that, you know, me being born in 2000, you know, I had never heard anything like that. You know,
yeah,
you don't grow up with those sounds. Those sounds are completely new. So it's as if I had listened to it for the first time, like anybody else had way back when it was released. And I mean, honestly, so much of the complexity and like musically to me and has just been such an inspiration for a lot of things that I do now when I make music, because even then I didn't make music, you know, I was just a part of a band. I didn't really like write music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But like it just impacted me how much work went into it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and how much thought, and yet at the same time it was really simple, you know.
Yeah.
So, but you know, it's all tied into, you know, at least now, since it was 8 years ago, it's really like the nostalgia for me too, because I used to listen to it on like trips and, you know, just every day. You know, it was one of the only, like, I've had several different like things to play music on. Like, I didn't always have a phone, you know. I would have an MP3 player or, you know, my iPod or whatever, and I would always have ELO on it. Like, that was a default.
It was kind of like your life soundtrack for a very short period of time.
Yeah, it was. It really was. It made me happy, you know. But yeah, so yeah, that's my history of it. That's how I got.
I have a
mostly
kind of similar one, but go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say mostly my mom and my uncle, they were both very into it, and I spent time with them a lot. So
yeah, for me it was, I think either my first introduction was, well, one from my dad. My dad has influenced my taste in music more than he will ever realize.
right.
Excuse. But you know, my dad influenced my music my music taste from a very early age. In fact, the first band I remember being like, I love this band with all of my heart and soul was fucking Kiss. Of all bands, it was Kiss. Like, I don't know what it was. At that time I was, about 8. So it was very much just this. I don't know if it, because I wasn't very obviously musically into music more. It was very much I guess they looked cool. These big fucking dudes with like huge, with like this, like what, Gene Simmons with his fucking axe bass. Ace Frehley was there.
The whole aesthetic.
Exactly. The whole aesthetic of the band was just intriguing to me, I guess. So that was the first band I really remember, like, really being like, holy shit. And then not long after that, my dad got me into ELO. I think, similar to you, it was probably Mr. Blue Sky.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I also didn't hear it growing up. I just guess I just didn't pay attention to it up until that point.
Yeah, it was probably the same for me. I may not have, like, really thought about it that much, but I may have heard it before.
Yeah. So it was like, it was something like Mr. Blue Sky, Telephone Line. I actually think it was probably all over the world. I have a very distinct memory of that song, which is shocking coming from someone who's had multiple concussions and very shitty memory. So I think, it's the one I have a very distinct memory of,
Right.
So I think that was like, it just kind of went from there. And then not long after I first heard a couple, their main hits, like Telephone Line, Turn to Stone, All Over the World, Mr. Blue Sky, stuff like that. Last Train to London is another one. I love that one.
Oh yeah, man! I really wish that song was on this album. Really.
Yeah. It deserves It deserves a spot, the very best.
It does.
Masterclass. Literally
Absolutely.
Just side note. Literally anything you could go from a fucking hat and pick an ELO song and be a masterclass in songwriting.
I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I'll save some of my words for later,
in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, it's like not long after I think I remember I saw Xanadu for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that entire soundtrack is ELO.
Right.
Yeah, sure. There's different singers on it because it was a movie. It's like, and the characters obviously had to sing, but the instrumentals were all ELO. Couple songs are just ELO, and Jeff Lynne's beautiful fucking voice singing on it. That's something else I love. Is Jeff Lynne has a beautiful voice.
Oh yeah, no, his voice completely. He carries so many of those tracks, just from his expression, like
the inflection of his words and how he pronounces and how he puts like the emphasis he puts on them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's like I heard. I had watched Xanadu. Obviously, it's one of my favorite movies now. I mean, I don't remember the dude's the lead dude, whatever his character or whatever the fuck the actor's name is. I don't remember, but he carried like suddenly him and like I love Olivia Newton-John to death. He carried that fucking song. Like really, he did. Oh, yeah. But like obviously that also simultaneously introduced me to Olivia Newton-John, which we'll get into at some point probably. So yeah, that's my biggest that I can recall early influence or discovery of ELO. And honestly, it's something that I'm really glad I discovered because of how vast and how malleable just their entire band structure is. It's obviously been able to open your ears to a lot of things because it's not just like there's power chords or like all acoustic guitars and like jazz drums, or like very light drums. It's like they cover everything from literal ballads to hard rock masterpieces. Early examples of hard rock.
Yeah, I really do love their diversity. It really, I mean, I didn't think about it like back when I first listened to it, and I really liked it. Sometimes, especially like before you start making music, you don't really think about like how it's made, or like all the variants of it. But really, it is so diverse, and it really makes it really enjoyable, especially in that compilation because like. Me, I love I could probably name like I could be probably number the genres of music that I don't like on one hand.
Exactly.
You know
It's
what I
the
mean?
same thing for me.
Yeah. So
It's because, like you said, they're diverse. They're so diverse, and they're able to cover multiple things in one song, even.
yeah, yeah, and they do it all well.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
very good with their smooth trans. Like they can do on like I don't know what's one that does that, like a really good example of that.
um, like which song
Yeah.
is a good example of transition? Well, I mean, you got to think about it. Like Mr. Blue Sky, even it
Oh,
has
it has a lot of the weird, like the piano intro,
yeah,
the basic
and that
rock drumming, and then it gets to the bridge, which is like Vocaloid.
yeah, and that little like transition towards the end where it just becomes like a almost like operatic.
Oh yeah,
It really just goes
and
into
it's and
all
that
its
it's
fullness with the orchestra and everything.
and that it's seamless.
Yeah,
It's like you would
exactly.
it's like you would never know that was recorded probably in two different sessions. You would think it was all one.
Yeah.
They're very good.
Well, I mean that's just good songwriting.
Good
I mean,
songwriting, good recording, great
yeah,
technique.
very good pull. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I I kind of am like nowadays when I look back, I'm like some of the bands I used to really fucking love. I'm like, man, I had a really shitty taste in music, but then I look at it from both perspectives of I had a really shit taste in music to now I look at it like, yeah, sure, these bands are garbage, but I wouldn't be listening to what I'm listening to now without those bands, right?
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
even through all
You're
that, ELO's has been a staple. Like not in a
Yeah.
negative way, because obviously I love ELO, but they've been such a staple, and I've never well I've heard almost never heard a bad song by ELO.
Yeah. I mean, every band's got their moments, but
Yeah,
I think I the thing is though, they're great they're like really good ones. You don't get tired of them. At
yeah.
least for me. Like I could listen to any of them over and over again for the past years and years, and I still wouldn't get tired of them. I'd still like get chills from Strange Magic or Telephone Line
Mm.
like any day.
I still get chills from both of those songs.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, when I was listening to these before we started recording, like I was surprised that I was getting affected as much as I did, but
Mm.
it's yeah, it's really powerful.
And I mean, I don't know. I think it just might be the fullness of the sound that makes it powerful.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like if it was
it's,
if
it's
it's like the thing for me is like obviously I'm not comparing them stylistically or genre wise, but like look at like the Ramones, right?
uh
4-piece punk band from New York could fill an entire room with sound with four dudes, and ELO does the same thing, fills an entire room of sound with like five or six core dudes and an entire fucking orchestra behind them.
yeah. I've even noticed sometimes in their live performances, sometimes it's just like two cellos and a violinist.
But they still fill the whole
And
room.
Yeah, and they still get that huge sound. I mean, like that's just
I
that's
think
amazing.
that any band that can turn around, no matter how many members, any band that could turn around, take the simplicity of having a small band, let's just use for example, let's just use a modern band. Let's use 21 Pilots, just an example, right?
Mhm.
Two dudes, that's it. Sure, they use tracks, but with those two dudes, they can fill a room with a very minimal amount of tracks, a piano, sometimes a ukulele or a bass, and drums, and they can fill a
Yeah.
room. I think that regardless of people saying you like a lot of people in circles I'm in currently musically are like you need a big band to make it sound huge, and I'm like no you don't. You can have a guitarist, a bassist, and a drummer, and it'll sound fucking huge.
Yep. It's all about your technique and your songwriting and your layering and a lot of it really as far as like my experience, I don't know if this is true, but a lot of it is just unison. A lot of it's very much just knowing that every piece has its place and letting it shine in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no. I mean, the ELO does that flawlessly. I mean,
Yeah, and I mean
and
it's something I aspire to
especially
do
in
music.
yeah. I mean, but especially in the time that they did it. I mean, you think about it, like what recording and editing software did you have in the 70s? You didn't.
Tape decks and
Like,
a mixing
yeah.
console.
Yeah, and yet still in that time, they were doing things that artists do today almost like
Yeah.
perfectly. Like effects on voices and things like that sound like they were made in a computer.
Mm-hmm.
That's how good they are. Like,
And nothing was digital back then.
No, I mean synthesizers, yeah, but like
No, even then,
recording and editing, no.
Synthesizers were analog.
Yeah,
Everything was all analog back then.
yeah, you're right.
There was
yeah.
barely anything digital that could be done because there was nothing that, like, the technology wasn't there.
Yeah, all pedal boards and
All the
decks.
guitar pedals were all were all analog. Nothing digital was used, especially in the creation of, these songs, because this album, this all over the world, has songs from their first album to their newest at the time album.
Yeah, right.
It's you can't tell which that song, like you said earlier, they don't sound like they're from the 70s.
No,
It's
that
engineering.
was so surprising. Yeah, it's just it is so crazy to me because like I feel like so much music, like especially music that was in the pop scene, like I feel like some of theirs can get dated so quickly. It can feel like it was from an era just because of how it sounds, or like you said, how it's recorded and how it's mastered. But somehow they achieved a sound that's almost timeless.
Yeah, and
And
I think
that-
there's only two other artists I can think of that mastered that. Michael Jackson and Prince.
What's that?
There's I won't say all of their material, but a good like.
I was about to say some of
well,
those things.
let's do
Some of
this.
those, not so much.
Let's do Purple Rain. Let's take Purple Rain and let's take Thriller or Bad, one of Michael Jackson's most popular albums.
Mm-hmm.
Comparing to
Yeah,
today's pop music, they sound like they came out yesterday. Yeah,
that's
sure,
fair.
every song it might not sound like that. But the majority of the songs sound like they came out yesterday.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
It's a lot of dating, and honestly, something that's really weird is that let's take a band kind of similar to ELO. Let's take Toto, right? Obviously,
Right.
meme hood gods with Africa, but then you take that, if you ignore that song for its meme hood, and you look at their entire catalog, this shit sounds dated. Obviously, it sounds manufactured, quote unquote, because they were studio musicians before they started the band.
Right.
Obviously, it's not a bad thing, but so it's like, yeah, sure, it might sound manufactured because of that, and sure, it might sound dated, but much like ELO, even though ELO never will sound dated to me, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah,
they can. It's the same effect. Same thing. We'll shoot back with Michael Jackson and Prince. They could fill a room. That the sound. And to jump back to that point too, the sound is there, and I think it's just when you look at like Toto, compared to Michael Jackson, Prince, and ELO, it's not a, obviously this, the engineering world is vast. It's fucking huge. So obviously they're not, and even with ELO, not every album is gonna sound the same because it's different engineers.
right.
And it's like, even though it's so vast, somehow Michael Jackson, Prince, and ELO have all managed to sound brand new, fresh music. They all all their music sounds fresh, even if it's 30, 40 years old.
Yeah.
And I just think that's fucking impressive, especially at the time. Like we've been saying, everything all analog. Analog tape decks. You want delay? You gotta splice the tape. You know, it's weird. It's so.
That's crazy.
It's so mind blowing that it can sound so new for being recorded on analog technology.
Yeah, it's so comparable to like watching old movies. You know, like the original Ghostbusters. You know, in comparison to like the Ghostbusters in 2016. You know, in 2016 you think, yeah, it's all CGI, right? You know, it's all it just, there's nothing special about it. But like back in the 80s, right? They're literally, filming a puppet and then projecting it onto some film, or not onto some film, but like some reflective material. It's like the analog process or the physical process. You don't even think about it, and that's what makes it good.
Mm-hmm. And I like the movie comparison, so I want to bring another one up. Yeah. So this is going to be a slight tangent, at least this very first sentence will be. One of my favorite movies ever made is The Thing, the John Carpenter film, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Not just because the acting is phenomenal. You know, you got Kurt Russell.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's not just because you got Kurt Russell and Wilford Brimley. You know, phenomenal actors have been in so many amazing movies, right?
Oh yeah. Yep.
When you look at The Thing, it's a pretty basic story, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, these dudes are trapped in Antarctica with this alien that's literally going to try and take over the world. You know, pretty basic, typical 70s sci-fi thing, right?
Right.
And it's so weird when you look at it and you think every single effect in that movie was done practically, all analog.
Yep.
And I think, I think it's the same thing with ELO. Like, obviously I'm going to compare it with it. Like, they could take this really basic thing. Like, we'll take Mr. Blue Sky, like their most popular song, right?
Right.
What's it about? The sky's fucking blue and there ain't a damn cloud in sight.
Mm-hmm.
Really basic, really simple songwriting, really simple song structure, stuff like that. But they take that and they can. I really love going back to this point of them sounding huge because they really do.
Oh yeah.
They sound huge with all analog stuff. And I think that's wild. And I really hate that we keep coming back to this point. But it's such an impressive feat for this band. I think it deserves to be talked about.
It is. I mean, yeah. The more that I get into digital production, you know, since I'm for people who don't know, I use Logic Pro. I'm like self-taught. A lot of what I do is just experimenting and learning through experience. I couldn't imagine doing any of this on analog because so much of it is just so much of what you have to do at that time is just you have you'd have to have a plan. Like there's no way you can experiment but so much because it's expensive. You know what I mean? It's expensive to keep cutting up tapes. It's expensive to be, renting out studios, It's not like they have all of this equipment at their house or, but yet again, they got it down this perfect and made this sound in that time that even kids today, like there are kids who in that band would have thought that 30 to 50 years later, people would still be singing their songs.
Exactly.
Or they would be putting their songs in movies.
Mm-hmm.
Or any of that. I mean,
who would have thought they would have a lasting impact on modern culture?
Yeah. It's kind of funny. This is turning more into an artist review than
it really is, but I think it still fits with it, truthfully.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It's a compilation album, so it's like the best of
we
them.
gotta have to talk. There's a lot we have to talk about.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But speaking of, I do think we should probably jump into some of the songs that we chose to specifically talk about.
All right. Sounds good.
So obviously we have 4. Which one do you want to start with?
How about we just go? Let's go in order of the album. Let's
All
just
right.
go with.
So it's what? Which one's
is
first?
it Horace Wimp first?
It's either Horace Wimp or
Horace
Turn to Stone, but we'll just do the list that I have written down. We'll do that.
Sure.
So let's. Man, this is going real weird.
Yep.
So let's start with.
We're making it through. We got
this. Excuse me. So let's start with the Diary of Horace Wimp. So,
right.
What's one thing that you wrote down about specifically that you love, that you enjoy about listening to Horace Wimp?
Well, I can distinctly remember the first time I heard that song.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like I said, it was like I was either 13 or 12, one of those. Doesn't matter. But
you were
I was on
age.
a trip. Yeah. And it sounds so strange. Like it's so weird to have a song from from a third person perspective, like that song is.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear that very often, and I think that might be the only song on that album that has that kind of like writing lyrically. Where it's talking about someone else, not about yourself.
It's a story-driven song. It's not a personal story-driven song, like.
Right. And I think it's also very. I don't know if it was like very common in that time to have songs that told stories, but it's very different from a lot of modern lyric writing, And I think a lot of ELOs, like their whole aesthetic, their whole their orchestral feeling and their fullness and their experimentation with a lot of different instruments. That was another thing I really liked about this song. They all lend to a very storytelling feeling anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a very a very folk-esque approach, we'll say, a very folk-esque approach to songwriting. Because you can go listen to the songs that would be like, let's go with Bob Dylan, a very prominent folk writer. He would constantly write songs in like a weird third person perspective. And it wasn't because it was like, oh, he doesn't like writing about himself, because he's written first person songs. But it was very much that approach. At that time, folk was a huge thing. And then fucking Hendrix came around and said, "Nah, folk, nah." It was a very normal, typical thing at the time. Which obviously this was 50s, 60s, not 70s. Right. But I think it's still a very a couple decades, close enough.
Yeah. Whatever. I wasn't born then, so
I wasn't born. I wouldn't even have thought in my non-existent dad's head.
But yeah,
it's a very folk approach to it, and I think that's very characteristic of this song specifically. It kind of adds to it, because again, I did write that down too. That's a very story-driven song.
It kind of reminds me of Hey Jude a little bit,
Yeah, how in that song they never say the word I. It's always written from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, hey, I like this song better than Hey Jude. So.
I like ELO more than I like the Beatles. Controversial, I know, but I fucking I love ELO.
Yeah, I don't care. ELO is better than the Beatles.
I agree.
But I mean, I know I've heard heard people review ELO and compare them to the Beatles a lot and say they have a Beatles sound, but I don't know. I don't agree with that.
Well, I think that's obviously they have a beat. They have definitely
they have
copied Beatles
the same elements
sounds, but it's not. They're not the Beatles. No, you can't compare two different styles of band. And honestly, I won't even put ELO in a genre, even though most people would say they're classic rock. I wouldn't put them in a genre. Because Beatles are classic. I wouldn't either. Because Beatles are classic rock, and all of their fucking songs sound the same.
Yeah, the only way I could say that ELO was even classic rock is just if you know that one song, "Hold On Tight to Your Dreams," I think is what it's called.
That's very classic. Yeah.
Yeah, that one is like if all of their songs sounded like that, yes, I would say that. But
Rock Aria is another one.
Yeah, Rock Aria. Yeah, I agree. Those ones sound dated to me, but
Yes.
not dated in that era that they were in. That sounds like 50s music.
Yeah. Or rock and roll,
which is weird.
What rock and roll over
But
Beethoven?
yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. Those they don't sound like, they don't even sound like the era that they came from.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was a big tangent. But anyway, the about back to Horace Wimp. I think, again, going back to the whole analog situation, a lot of the vocal effects that they used to really create contrast in the story, to not only add to the atmosphere of the song, with the, like, whenever the voice from above or whatever came down and have that, like, really huge echo and have it so different from the Jeff Lynne's normal singing voice.
Mm-hmm.
Really, like, that made me really, really like it. And always having those, whenever they would say the name of the day.
Yeah.
With the vocoder, and those were the only times that the vocoder would ever come in.
Yeah.
Those really, like, even though it's all Jeff Lynne, right? It really does create that contrast between those voices, using Jeff Lynne's as the major, almost as if he himself is Horace Wimp from the third perspective, from the third person, I mean. And then there's the voice from above, and then there's the vocoded vocals that he did that are tracking the days as the song goes on.
Yeah.
So I think the vocal work was just really good in that.
Mm-hmm. And you said we talked about the three of my big points that I like about Horace Wimp, but I think the one that, and I think you'll agree because it plays into all of them, is the layering that's on that song. Like, you would never guess on first listen that there's at least 15 tracks.
No,
you would never. You would never guess, especially without, like, again, to hop back to the analog. With analog, you wouldn't guess that there was 15 tracks on that song, at least.
No,
it's so in depth, and I think to hop back to the huge point of the huge sound, it's how they get their sound. They layer so much on every single song.
And there's no other way that they could have pulled off a song like that and gotten it, like, as big as it is, I think. Because if it was, I feel like it would be almost like comparable to, like, that song, oh man, what is it called? The Once I Was 7 Years Old, whatever that song
7
is.
years.
Yeah. That it's a very similar idea, but even in that song, they do some of some very similar things. They add a lot of orchestra to make it feel full, to make the story, to make you feel the story and not just hear it.
Yeah.
And ELO did it first.
Yeah, and I think it's wild how much you don't expect there to be so many layers to songs.
Oh yeah.
It's like, and I'm gonna hop back to 21 Pilots again, because I think, in a way, they're kind of a modern ELO, even though they're two dudes. Because again, or like they do a lot of the same techniques that ELO did, and that's why they sound so huge, even in their softer stuff and their more poppy stuff, and not their deep cuts on their back catalog. They sound fucking massive because there's so much different layering going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's fucking wild that they can get that much layering done and get that much sound out of it with two dudes using Logic that obviously ELO didn't have access to at that time. But same point still stands, that very limited tool set, huge sound.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So we covered Horace.
Yep.
Check mark.
What's the next one?
Strange Magic.
Yes.
So I want to start.
This one.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say this one for me and like my family is kind of controversial. I'm the only one of us that likes it a lot.
Mm.
But anyway, you go ahead though.
So the first thing that I really love, which it also is very much with the layering point from that I brought up with Horace Wimp. Excuse-moi. There's almost no audible electric guitar in Strange Magic. It's almost all acoustic.
Yeah.
And I think that's fucking insane. That with what? I'm trying to think. When they do it live, they're not using tracks either. They play it all. I'm thinking there's what?
Right.
With what they do live, there's 3 or 4 acoustics playing. And there's 1 electric. I think it's great that with, 4 acoustic guitar tracks and 1 electric track, and strings, synths, drums, bass, all the vocals, they sound massive, especially with acoustic. The guitars sound huge on that song, and they're not electric. I think,
and not even in a like an overwhelming way. I think it's a very soft song.
It's a very soft yet powerful song, I'd say.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Gets stuck in my head a lot, I'll tell you that.
My feel on that one. Hell, even talking about it, I just hear, got a strange magic. That's all I hear.
It's just boom, 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 boom.
Exactly. It's such an earworm, but in the best way possible.
Yeah. And that was one thing that I wrote down. I said that the chord progression in that song is like, I don't like mean this in a negative way, but it's repetitive, but in a way where it doesn't get old.
Yeah.
Because it's so worth being repeated.
Yeah, and I think that with how the song is written, I think that with that, like, especially with things like obviously with all the choruses, vocal wise and lyrically, they're identical, right? Because it's a chorus, it needs to be identical.
Oh yeah.
But here's something I noticed, which kind of brings me to my next point. The harmonies in that song are immense, especially on the choruses.
Yeah, they really make it.
But I noticed something, even listening to it now, because like me and you said, it gives us chills every time.
Yeah.
Even now, I've noticed different harmonies are highlighted in each chorus. It's not just the lead line of Jeff Lynne. It'll be anybody else's. Much, even though at that point they're probably all Jeff Lynne.
Yeah. You know what? Now that I think about it, yeah, that's you're right about that.
It's very subtle, and truthfully, I think it was a mistake, but I think it is one of the best musical mistakes I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I was about to say it might have been unintentional, but God, that it does make it.
It really adds to it, because it's not like you're listening to it and the only thing you hear the whole time is "got a strange magic." It's you're hearing the harmonies.
Yeah. And the one thing I really, really do like is while there are the harmonies going on in the chorus too, and even in the verses, there's a lot of like really tight unison with all the rest of the instruments.
Oh yeah.
The strings and the keyboard and the guitar, especially in that beginning riff before the verses start, that da, 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 that, and everything is in sync so well, and again, it is harmony, yeah, but the rhythmic unison is what I'm talking about. That really makes those parts really interesting to listen to and really soothing,
Yeah. So
especially even in being off time, a little bit.
Yeah.
Just to give it a little more like
it gives it a chorusy effect. Like there's chorus on everything.
Exactly.
So I'll bring up one more point, and we won't stay on this one long because I do want to go ahead and try and finish these other two songs so we can keep this concise. The synth and string arrangements are immense.
Yeah.
Really, it's just something ELO does really well is their synth arrangements. Their synth and strings are gorgeous. Both mixing sound, just sound in general, and just the palette that they choose to use to create
their sound
to add to this canvas, you know?
Yeah. Their soundscapes are always really great.
They are.
There's so many ways in which their sound could like really get corny. I feel like, you know, there are a lot of bands and songs that use orchestra and use synthesizers, especially from that time, that sound really like cheesy.
Yeah.
But they really did choose the right sounds and the right, like you said, you know, the right mixing to get all that into a really, really nice sounding sound that doesn't like fade with age.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Do you have any other points that you want to talk about before we move on?
No. Nope.
All right, let's move on to Telephone Line, which is the one I feel like might take a little bit of the longest because it's such a in-depth song.
Bruh.
I think the two big points that we really need to talk about.
Oh boy.
Are the harmonies and the really good style changes that are in the song.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, we both know that we love this song because we tried to we were starting to cover it. I mean, like,
yeah.
I'm gonna start going on rants about this, but like even like covering it, you know, just singing those words, like, you know, as I've grown older, they've meant more and more to me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I first heard it, you know, I couldn't relate as much to it, but you know, the more relationships I went through, the more time went by, you know, the more it meant to me, and it really those lyrics for me are like the most relatable and like straightforward to me from the album, you know, because yeah, it's a ballad, you know, it's a sad ballad in a lot of ways, but it just the vocals themselves, you know, I could literally speak about the vocals in this song, you know, for the entire segment. Like,
yeah, literally, there's so much going on with them.
Jeff Lynne's vocals on this song carry the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were saying in the beginning, his vocals carrying a lot of this band. This song specifically,
he carries
his vocals carry. Absolutely.
He has such emotion in his voice, which really lends me to believe, even though this band is very much, well, it's not even the band. Let's just say that, you know, even though Jeff Lynne is a very story-driven writer, true or fictional story, right? Just based on this song, I think this there's no doubt in my mind this song's true for him.
Oh yeah,
like this has to be a true song.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. It's also from, unlike Horace Wimp, it's from a first-person perspective.
Yeah, so it adds to that whole story of it.
Yeah, it makes it really personal, and I like how before the song, you know, really gets into what it's about, you're led into it very softly with just the hello that, like, people always associate hello with like Adele and Lionel Richie, but I always think of
ELO.
This song.
No, and something else that I can't.
Way before those two.
Something else I think leads into, which kind of can go into the style change part of it. The intro on its own, you know, it starts with a telephone. It starts with the I guess waiting.
Yep.
The waiting sound when you're waiting for someone to pick up.
Yep.
But in this weird the weird synth line. They kind of I think it's meant to replicate a, like, because back, you know, in the 70s it was dial boards. You know, you call the operator and they'd be like, all right, like, who do you want to talk to? And they'd be like, oh, this person, and they'd be like, all right, and they put your line into connect. They connect the line.
Put the line in the literal hole.
Yeah. So it was a very, again, analog thing. So it wasn't like, today where you call someone and it bounces to a satellite and bounces to their phone. It was very much you had to wait for the operator to put the line in, and then you had to wait for someone to pick up, and if no one picked up, try again tomorrow.
And yet again, even in this song, in that part, he had that telephone effect on his voice. That's something that they had to have engineered. Which is also crazy. I mean, they use so many vocal effects in a time where, vocal effects were usually just like a side thing.
Yeah.
But they were using it for storytelling, for emphasis of the lyrics, and it was really, really well thought out.
They really did find a way to incorporate a lot of style. Flashy style. Yeah. We'll say flashy style.
Yeah.
Into this specific song. I think
almost musical like,
It was very musically flashy, of course, but it was flashy for the time. And now you look at today and it's just like, he sounds like he's coming through an AM radio or a telephone. It's all mid-range, it's all EQ. Back in the 70s when people heard this song, they were probably like, what the fuck? Was he on the phone? Did they record him on the phone?
Yeah, I know exactly. It was just so much more then.
Mm-hmm.
But even now, I mean, it served a double purpose of being like
introductory and in effect.
Yeah, exactly. It was something that impressed people at the time, but also made sense to the song, which is, that's always great to do.
Yeah. All right. And with that, on that note, I would like to go to Turn to Stone. The time limit that we said, we're cutting it real close, but I think we can still last.
Yeah. We can go over a little bit.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
So let's go with Turn to Stone. I have very little really to say about this that can't be said about everything else on the list.
Yep.
My main favorite part is the intro, that synth on that low E.
Oh yeah,
and the drums fade in.
Yeah, that is so good. I'll say like this song is probably my favorite musically on the album.
I agree.
Like it's got like it. Blue Sky was all right as an introductory, but like this song is the best musically of any of them. It's just got the great harmonies, great back and forth with the strings and the vocals in the chorus, and the verses don't get boring. They've always got that really interesting, almost like rolling feeling with the guitar going in those circular chords.
That's actually a point I made, is that even though it's circular, because here's something I think I noticed about this song. It's a very synth and drum driven song.
Yeah.
So I think that the guitar being very cyclical and the chords it makes it a subtlety. There's a certain subtlety to it that it's there, it's there, but you don't process it fully. Like, obviously you're listening to a fucking rock band. Of course there's going to be guitars on it. Mm-hmm. Whether or not it's amp, Spinal Tap joke incoming, amp crank to fucking 11, maxed out fucking amp, natural,
goes up to 11.
Exactly. Crank the fuck up and distorted, overdriven guitars. It's mild overdrive, mild breakup, enough to give the song character and add a texture to it.
Right.
And I think that's something that's super important to add to the song. But again, I think that it's a very synth-oriented song, especially with that throughout that ostinato, and then just at the beginning that that low E on that saw synth.
Well, also, I mean, we also got to talk about that outro to that song.
Yeah, that's so good, dude.
So good, going like from that straight into that really nice orchestral ending,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that slows it down and gives it some like acoustic piano and, you know, still keeps that fullness that was in the song and again, like ends it like it's a I don't know, like it's a
Like we
the
didn't just
end
go
of
through
a
this fucking
story. Like
journey with synths.
yeah, exactly.
There's actually
Exactly.
this song reminds me, not stylistically, but like instrumentally and how it's written, like song structure.
Uh-huh.
It reminds me a lot of Layla, the Derek and the Domino song, because you know you got this rock song going through most of it, and at the end you get a piano with some slide guitar.
Yeah.
It's a very weird story driven song.
Classical and metal or rock always go together. I don't care what you say.
Yeah,
Always.
I agree.
It's just a match made in heaven.
It's just fucking fact at this point.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, I had one more thing about
Oh,
this
go ahead.
song. The lyrics are very abstract, you know.
They really do
I
paint the
think, in
picture.
comparison. Like they like you don't really like, at least for me, I'll talk for myself.
Mm.
I feel like I don't like in my mind know what the song is about, but I know like in my heart I know what's about.
Yeah,
You know,
it's so
like the
abstract
lyrics
that
don't make sense
like you can
literally.
visualize certain things.
Yeah.
But like
I mean, yeah, the chorus does make it a little more obvious, but like the verses are very abstract and giving you like this, I don't know, just like a picture of something really bleak, but still at the same time everything sounds more bright and like like you're moving forward.
mm-hmm.
It's very, I don't know. It's a really good contrast. It makes it really interesting feeling.
Mm.
But
But
anyway, I'll remember that song for forever. I'll show that to my kids.
yeah.
But
So with that, I obviously I sent you the structure because you know you helped me get this. You're the first guest. You're helping me get through this.
yeah,
Get this thing up and rolling. I obviously sent you this little structure I wanted to have to it. I have this thing of like how is this important to us? But I think we kind of explained that.
yeah, I think we already kind of.
I think that's
over it,
something like.
but
I think that specific one is definitely more of that specific, you know, talking point. We'll say is definitely a flexible one. It can be throughout the whole thing. It can be all in one block. You know, we've obviously been making it very clear how much this band and this album means to us and how it's influenced
absolutely.
us throughout this whole thing. So we'll try this recommend thing. Like, do you think that the whole album is like if someone came up to you and you know you're playing like Mr. Blue Sky and they're like, oh, I love this song, and you were like, do you know anything else by them? And they said no, and you knew their music taste. Is this something you would like as a whole recommend, like the whole album, or do you think that it's more of a song basis, like listen to these songs and you can ignore the rest of this greatest hits album?
I would say this album, all over the world specifically, I think the entire thing is definitely good enough to be recommended, like it's in its entirety. Because yes, there are some songs that aren't as great as others, but majority of the songs are like as great as each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say. So yeah, I mean, I would recommend the entire album.
I'm in that.
I would listen to it from the beginning to end, and you know, experience it in its entirety.
I'm on that same page with you. I think that this album has a lot of nuance to it that really, again, like I said at the beginning, shaped, even to this day, the mass impact that this band has had on modern pop culture, music culture specifically, obviously.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think that it's obviously something that people should listen to, especially if they're into the more pop rock scene. I think that this is something that's like if they listen to this album, they'll dive deep. They'll take a deep dive head first into the rest of the catalog. Yeah, sure. Some of the catalog is
dive.
obviously,
Oh my God.
and
Nobody can understand.
Nobody can.
Listen to the album, you'll understand that reference.
Exactly. They'll take a deep dive head first into the back catalog. Yeah, sure. Me and you have listened to the whole fucking catalog because we love ELO. Yeah, sure. Some of the catalog is lackluster.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think that here's my outlook on it if in terms of me as a musician getting my friends into certain things of music. As long as I can get them to listen to at least one entire album and get some sort of feedback on it, positive, negative, whatever it may be, I feel successful.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I of course will recommend this album.
And I feel like so many generations have liked it. It really does bring you like closer to those generations, really understanding like maybe not just understanding but appreciating the work that goes into a lot of that stuff. And really, if you're a musical artist, like it'll give you a new perspective on like what's possible, even if you're in your genre, or you're in your like we've been saying,
you're in your zone.
Yeah, you've got your own band, you've got whatever you have, you can make something that sounds awesome and big, or whatever you want it to sound like. It just takes some intuition and some hard thinking,
Mm-hmm. So really, just as a closing mark before we wrap this up.
Right.
Just the closing thing is to any of the musicians listening, any of the wannabe musicians who want to get into music. Listen to this album. It'll broaden your horizons on what, like you said, what you can do musically in a in a soundscape. In the sonic space, it'll really show you how, even if like I said, also said at the beginning, this literally every single song on this album is a fucking masterclass in songwriting.
Oh yeah.
It's like not just lyrically, instrumentation, musically, layering, mixing, all that, vocal performance. It's very much every song is a masterclass in doing it. But if you
absolutely
have to take away, to anyone listening, say you think you don't have time, like say you don't have time to listen to a whole album, like sit down and really enjoy it. Do the 4 songs that we listen to, at least the 4 songs we talked about today in this episode.
Yeah.
Though I think those 4 songs are the most important on, say, for Mr. Blue Sky. I think they're the most important songs on this album, this compilation, because there's so much going on with them. So if you're a musician and you don't think you have time to listen to the full album, at least listen to those 4 songs. So yeah, I think that about does it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Well, hey, thank you for having me.
I'll take you back anytime to do it. I will.
Bruh, hopefully the RNG will
hopefully the algorithm will be like
J-back, yes sir, boing. Let's go.
Hopefully the algorithm goes hee hee hee. Yep. But anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. I'm sorry if this thing was kind of a mess and quality, at least for mine, was a little weird. This is the first one, so I'm working out the kinks still. But I appreciate you listening from the bottom of my heart. I really do. Thank you for listening to episode 1 of the Phonic Files, and maybe see you next time.
Yep.